The story of Nancy Pelosi's husband having been attacked is getting crazier, my friends, and you're going to love it. We are going to dive into a deranged world of conspiracies, psyops, and yes, Gamergate. I'm not kidding. The New York Times has published a quote where the guy is apparently saying that he was radicalized by Gamergate. Yo, it's been almost 10 years, and these people just won't drop it. But here's where it gets crazy. David Depape, you may have heard the name, accused of striking Nancy Pelosi's husband in the head with a hammer. And the story changed and was very strange. Who answered the door? Why were they both there? A reporter from, I think it was the Today Show, actually is on leave because he accurately reported that when the police came to the door, Paul Pelosi calmly answered and then turned and walked back to his alleged assailant, and then a fight happened. Doesn't make sense. The latest story is that Depape's son says, quote, "For all we know, he was some sort of sex slave." What? Okay, I don't believe that. I'm sorry. You're not going to convince me that Paul Pelosi had a secret slave in the house. But you're also not going to convince me of this psyop nonsense where this guy who is a Green Party leftist all of a sudden becomes a Trump supporter and wants to go after Tom Hanks. That's what they're claiming. Okay, you know what? I'll tell you what I think is the most likely scenario. Something crazy happened. Depape is clearly out of his mind. His kids, they say, here's what we think about his politics. He's hardly a right-wing conservative, probably right about that, probably speculating on some other things. The truth is always closer to the middle, but we don't know for sure. I think David Depape may have been doing some business with Pelosi. I don't think it was likely some, well, how do you describe this one as a guy? Gigolo kind of thing? I don't know. Maybe drugs. Maybe that's why they want to cover it up. Maybe the police made a mistake. Maybe something bad happened. They don't want the press to know about it. They don't want the public to know about it. That I can believe. And it may just be that Depape is in court saying crazy things because he is a crazy person. I think that's possible. I think it's probable. But for the time being, we have wild theories, and I can't discount them. Right now, the big issue that they're talking about with Elon Musk is violence, violent rhetoric, incitement to violence. And Elon Musk himself is not even free of any guilt. Elon Musk suspended Kanye West, because he posted this symbol of some religion called Raelism, which looks like a swastika in a Star of David. And Elon Musk said, well, he was inciting violence. You see, that's the name of the game. All of these activist groups are coming out and saying these people are radicalized. That's why it's happening. And lo, we have now Bill Maher coming out in an interview and saying this could lead to a civil war. Bill, really? You're the guy who not even that long ago said it couldn't happen because we're all mixed together. And now he's coming around saying again, just this past weekend, I believe, that he thinks it could lead us to a civil war. Okay, call it whatever you want. I think there is something dark happening when, for whatever reason, you have this story. Here's what I'll tell you. If the kid of this guy, Depape, is coming out saying he may have been some kind of sex slave, doesn't matter if you think it's true or not, and I say it for everything, there will be people who believe it. There will be people commenting in the description below, commenting on this video saying, Tim, it's obvious he was. And I'm going to say, I don't know. You can believe whatever you want. But the leftists will come out and say there's no way it's possible. The right will be like, dude, I've seen some crazy things. The Epstein Island stuff turned out to be real. And neither side will agree. No matter what you do, you will not be able to convince the demoralized people that black is black and white is white. So, all that matters. The story makes no sense any way you cut it. The story in the court hearing, he wanted to go after Tom Hanks. I don't see how that. Gamergates? Come on. You're not going to convince me, man. Sorry. I will tell you this. Believe whatever you want. I'm just going to read you the news. Before we get started, my friends, head over to timcast.com, become a member in order to support our work directly. As a member, you get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, Cast Castle Vlog. We are working diligently every day and night to expand this operation and influence culture. We're trying our best. We are not the biggest, we are not the best, but we are working very, very hard. The one thing I can guarantee you is that while we may be decently good at what we do in some areas and bad at others, we will persevere and we will work our fingers to the bone. With your support, that work, in my opinion, is the only thing that matters. We will get better at what we do. We will do it better, and we will succeed. Click that Join Us button, and you'll also get to see my good friend, Mr. Bokus. He is very sick, and I want to give everyone a special thank you yesterday who commented positive things in my final tribute to Mr. Bokus. He seems to be doing okay. He's eating a lot. We've been giving him IV fluids. Hopefully he makes it a bit longer, but he is clearly sick. So when you become a member, you can see all of our good friends and talent. There's a lot more people who work here at Timcast, but these are a lot of the forward-facing individuals. You can see Roberto Jr. Smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's get into this story. Exclusive for the Daily Mail. For all we know, he was some sort of sex slave. Son of Paul Pelosi's alleged attacker says his father is not evil, believes in human rights, and is hardly a right-wing conservative. Here we go. The man accused of breaking into the house of Speaker Nancy Pelosi's home and battering her elderly husband with a hammer has suffered a traumatic life full of abuse, his son has told thedailymail.com exclusively. You know, I'm not too interested in sympathizing or empathizing with his life of abuse. I have no problem pointing it out and saying we should do better in our society. But look, when you're dealing with a violent assailant, I don't think we need to come out and say, oh, this poor man. I do think it's fair to say, like, here's how he may have gotten to this point. Sure. Quote, there is almost no person on this planet that has gone through so much suffering. Nebasvad Sky Gonzalez said, if you look into his eyes, you can see he's such a sad person. He isn't a danger to society. I don't even know if he even attacked Mr. Pelosi. For all that we know, he was some sort of sex slave, as Elon Musk pointed out. No! Here we go. This was the story in October. Elon Musk deletes conspiratorial tweet to Hillary Clinton suggesting Paul Pelosi's attacker was gay prostitute. Fake news site behind story once claimed Hillary died and was replaced by body double in 2016. Okay, look, the Epstein stuff, that's real. Epstein got caught. Maxwell is in jail. Where's the client list? Don't come to me and tell me these conspiracies are too far-fetched. It's entirely possible that some of this weird stuff may be. I'm just going to go ahead and say, I doubt it. There's weird stuff. But you know what I think? A lot of people want to talk about trafficking, pizza stuff. And I'm like, guys, let's start with the simple hypothesis. Drugs. What do I think Depape may have been doing in the middle of the night with Paul Pelosi if it wasn't a break-in? They said the glass is on the outside. Paul Pelosi answered the door for the cops, calmly walked over to this guy. Here's what I think. Drug deal, man. That's it. Why don't they want you to know the full details? Because Paul Pelosi was buying drugs. Dude, everybody does drugs, basically. Okay, everybody. Obviously, not literally everybody. I don't do it. I'm not a fan of that stuff. I don't even have tattoos, no piercings. What a boring guy, right? But most people, in some way, they're doing something. And if you came to me and said, hey, Paul and Nancy Pelosi do crazy drugs, I'd be like, sure, I guess. I'd believe it. Yo, people think Ian on Timcast IRL is doing drugs like crazy. He's not, but people can believe it. Here we go. Depape, 42, is due in court in San Francisco Wednesday for an arraignment on state charges, including attempted murder, first-degree residential burglary, elderly abuse, assault with a deadly weapon, et cetera, et cetera. So he's actually been in court already, and we'll get to those updates. Here's his son. On the eve of the state hearing, his older son came to his defense. Quote, he often told us he was raised in an abusive home and would be physically abused by his grandparents. He said Depape, 42, told him and his brother, Daniel, now 17, that his parents had pawned him off to his grandparents who were physically abusive. Okay, I'm not going to go through his whole life, but I want to get to the issue of his politics. He says, I'm surprised about the whole thing. There is still a lot of info that hasn't been given to the public. I have no clue what happened or how it happened. There are more questions than answers right now. Do we even know what really happened? Yeah, I agree. I agree with that statement. We don't know. The police have changed their story. The press doesn't have a grip on what's going on. I'm not a fan of any of the conspiracy theories. I can just say that we don't know. That's what the court case is for. Now, I'm sure all the weirdos in leftist media are going to twist my words, but I'd like to see the evidence. They say that they were given the name Gonzalez as a tribute to a Mexican family who saved their mother's life. Gonzalez said when they were younger, his father took them to the park, and he has fond memories of his upbringing with Depape. He tried to be the best father he could be. He said he tried to set up a jailhouse visit with his father, but so far not successful. He also debunked the idea that the attack was politically motivated. Quote, my father had a lot of political views and told me about a lot of different things, but he didn't subscribe to either political party, Democrat or Republican. Depape said the two parties are just covers and colors, his son said. What matters are the policies of each individual person. Each individual person is unique, and it isn't about right or left. Gonzalez said he believed his father was a member of the Green Party. I'm pretty sure we know that. We've checked that. That's true. He said, my father had progressive views. He believed in human rights, equality, and justice. He was against the war. He was a peace activist, hardly a right-wing conservative, as he's been branded. Gonzalez said it's been several years since he's seen Depape. One day, my father got into a fight with my mother, and she kicked him out, and then we lost contact with him. He described Depape as the fun parent, but admitted he contributed very little financially. The only job he has had for as long as his son can remember is making bracelets, which provided little or no money for his family. Instead, he left the job as the breadwinner of the family to the mother, Taub, who is currently locked up at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California, for the attempted abduction of a 14-year-old boy. Yikes, man. Shortly after the attack, Taub told ABC 30 her former partner was mentally ill. Easiest explanation, in my opinion. That's just it. Easiest explanation. It's not political. It's a crazy guy. From the New York Times. Video footage of attack on Paul Pelosi shown at San Francisco hearing. David Depape, the man accused of bludgeoning Pelosi, told the police that he also had Newsom and Tom Hanks on his target list. Okay. Clearly, he's crazy. Now, they didn't post the video, so sure. I'll take it with a grain of salt. The New York Times says, it was as quick as it was brutal, captured in just a few seconds, of grainy video from a police body camera. Arriving at the home of Pelosi, two officers find an intruder and Paul standing calmly, each with a hand on a hammer. The police demand they drop. Just then, the video shows the intruder takes control, wields the weapon over his head, and slams it with full force. Mr. Pelosi was face down on the ground, a pool of blood by his head. The suspect in the case, David Depape, dressed in an orange jail clothes, his hair long and scraggly, sat quietly next to his attorney during the hearing. Prosecutors presented the fullest account to date of what they say happened during the attack. Depape said in a police interview hours after the attack that he had other targets, including Newsom and Tom Hanks, Hunter Biden, and the feminist writer and anthropologist Gail Rubin, according to his testimony. Prosecutors during the hearing also played an audio recording of the interview that Depape gave to police. In it, he admitted to busting into the Pelosi home in the upscale Pacific Heights neighborhood through the back door on a mission to capture the House Speaker, interrogate her, and break her kneecaps if she lied to him. You see, a lot of people don't want to believe it. It's entirely plausible. The dude is clearly crazy. I don't think he was being held by a slave. And even if, this dude has every reason to claim that he was. Okay, if he really believed that Pelosi was this evil, he could have just been like, yep, I was captured and they did these things. He's not saying that. You can come to me and you can offer up any solution. But my only real turn here is this guy seems to be out of his mind. Could he have attacked and done all these things? Absolutely. That seems to be the simple solution, much as people don't want to believe it. I certainly will question the official narrative because the police kept changing their story. The simple solution still remains. The dude probably just broke in and attacked him because he's a nut job. Miss Pelosi, though, was in Washington. Instead, they found Mr. Depape armed with a hammer carrying zip ties. He found Mr. Pelosi asleep in his bed. The attack came 11 days before the midterms. Really interesting. Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy as he confronted her? Miss Pelosi herself had been the subject of attacks by right-wing officials, blah, blah, blah. The purpose of the Wednesday preliminary hearing was for a judge to weigh the evidence against Mr. Depape and determine whether it was sufficient to move forward to a trial. And if so, on what charges? Judge Stephen Murphy of San Francisco Superior Court ruled there was enough evidence for the case to go ahead. The body camera footage showed the moment when Mr. Depape took control of the hammer and lunged at Mr. Pelosi, striking him once, really hard. I want to stress that. I really doubt they would lie about body camera footage. They're not releasing it. They're making a statement. I really doubt they would lie about it. Now, hold on. I'll put it this way. There is a possibility they are lying about it. Unless I see it, I don't know. Sorry. Where I will lean is people probably saw it. It's probably as they described. As much as I love to rag on the New York Times, I really doubt they would lie about something so provable. You know what I mean? Like, if they came out and said we saw the footage and it showed this, and then a week later the video footage showed something totally opposite, yeah, that would be detrimental to a great degree. That being said, far be it from me to defend the New York Times, who produce a whole bunch of garbage. So, until I see the footage, I reserve judgment. I'm just saying, hey, look, guys, Occam's razor, right? Really hard, Mr. Cagney said when asked by a prosecutor to describe the force of the hammer attack. The hearing began with prosecutors playing a recording of a call Mr. Pelosi made to 911. During the call, Mr. Pelosi speaks calmly but emphatically, seemingly trying to convey to the operator that he's in danger, but without alarming the intruder threatening his life. You see, that's what I had said before, right? He said on the call, a gentleman was here waiting for my wife to come back. The name is David. He apparently said that he knew the guy, or he was friends with the guy, but he didn't know him. And a lot of people were like, what does that mean? How could he be friends with the guy? I'm like, dude, someone broke into my house and they were crazy. Do you think I'm going to scream at them, obscenities? Do you think I'm going to yell, help, help, there's a crazy guy trying to kill me? No, I'm going to try and talk him down. I'm going to be like, hey, man, feel free to hang out, have a seat, let's talk. Let me know what you need. And I'd call and I'd say, so who are you and how'd you get in here? Oh, I see. Well, you can't just come in like that, but I will talk to you about this. Like I would do the same thing. In a news conference after the hearing, Brooke Jenkins, San Francisco DA, said the case reflected the toxic environment that we're living in. Not only that we can't engage in civil discourse with respect to our political differences, she continued, but that people believe it is okay to enact acts of violence against our political leadership for simply taking a position that is not in accordance with what that person believes. Hey, I agree with that. But until you go out and go after Antifa, I'm going to say, yeah. I don't care. You can say all this stuff, but it's because it's Pelosi who was attacked. When Antifa went around, they actually stabbed a guy in the Bay Area or something like that a while ago. You got to call that out. You got to stop it. Mr. Pelosi spent 6 days in the hospital where he underwent surgery for a skull fracture. Look, man, I hope he's okay. I don't like the guy. I think there's something weird about that accident he got into, the DUI. There's somebody else in the car. Yo, what's going on? I think he's buying drugs, man. A lot of people think it's a gay prostitute thing. Here's what I think. I think the gay prostitute narrative is political. I think that people on the right, understanding the power of these kinds of things, crafted the narrative because it is very, very bad for the Pelosis. It's very bad. If the story was that Paul Pelosi was hooking up with some dude or had a sex slave, it would be very bad. And we saw what happened with that Democrat donor in I think it was LA. We saw what happened with that dude in Florida. Was it Gillum or whatever? Yikes. This freaks people out. However, I see that story and I say, guys, unless I see hard evidence, I'm not just going to believe that. It is effective in terms of a political attack, however, because people will believe it. Do what you got to do, I guess. I'm going to call it like I see it. I think there is a strong possibility this was drugs. Now, why would Depape not just come out and say that? There's equal, it's also likely that it was an attack. That's just the reality, man. You can make arguments to justify why it was or wasn't. It may be that they threatened him and said, look, we know you got kids, just say this. Fine. I'm not going to take the crazy guy's word for it, or anybody's word for it. You know what I mean? Here we go. How did it come to be? In recent years, though, the many hours he spent online playing video games appeared to be his gateway to the virulent right-wing conspiracy theories that have proliferated, blah, blah, blah. He said it was Gamergate. Oh, no. Quote, how did I get into all this? He wrote, Gamergate. It was Gamergate. No one would ever say that. That right there is the biggest red flag. It is a gigantic red flag flying in the air with a sickle and a hammer on it. Okay? Even if someone was introduced to this by Gamergate, the likelihood they come out and say, Gamergate is what radicalized me. That is what the left says. That is what the woke journalists say. Like Carl Benjamin, of all people, was heavily involved in all this stuff. He's not going to come out and be like, well, I'm only here because of Gamergate. He's going to be like, well, I can't speak for Carl, but the average person is going to say there was a clear shift happening in the media landscape. We are tired of the lies. They're not going to say Gamergate. It's like a buzzword that means nothing. And they go on to mention his story. Call it Gamergate. Here's the news. Let's read some more. Paul Pelosi attack suspect David Depape allegedly cited evil in Washington in a hammer displayed to judge. Allegedly cited evil in Washington, hammer displayed to judge. Depape's preliminary hearing will determine if the attack state case advances to trial. Apparently it will be, because they're saying that he is going to stand trial. CNN reports that Paul Pelosi's attacker planned to target Hunter Biden, Gavin Newsom, and Tom Hanks, blah, blah, blah. So we'll see. All right. Look, there's a lot of weird stuff in the world. The Epstein stuff turned out to be true. If you come to me and say you think this guy was a gay prostitute or a sex slave, I'd be like, well, the Epstein stuff was true. But you're still going to have to give me evidence. Just because Alex Jones was very much right about Epstein and the FBI was protecting this guy basically doesn't mean that other conspiracy theories are also true. It does, however, mean I ain't going to trust the mainstream media, and I'd like to just figure this one out on my own. Of course, the leftists, the media machine, the narrative will come out and say, they did. We talked about this on IRL, and we were talking about how we just don't know. We just don't know. And then they claimed that we were pushing the conspiracy theories. And it's like, unless you come out and say definitively that you agree with the official narrative, then you are pushing conspiracies. Oh, shut up. Okay? Doubt is allowed. And I don't trust you. And I don't care what you think. So the question then becomes, where are we going? Well, a story that I covered, because it involves me as the number one person on Media Matters list, is from TechCrunch. Anti-LGBTQ slur takes off on Twitter after Elon Musk's takeover. Yeah. That's the game they're playing. Groomer. Well, I'll say it again, and I'll say it every single time. Why? Because you all who pay attention know. Groomer does not mean LGBTQ. I have many good friends who are LGBTQ, some of my best friends, and they're not groomers. So strange. Blair White on the list. Blair White's a trans person. Blair White's not calling herself a groomer. I got no problem using the preferred pronouns of Blair White either, because I am not a staunch conservative. I am not in complete agreement with people like Ben Shapiro, but we do agree on freedom and debate and ideas. And so that's why I've always said I'm more of a, liberal, because I got no problem saying Blair White, she, her, and all that stuff. So why are they lying? Well, I don't know. I think they want violence or something like that. They want people to attack us. It's stochastic terrorism. People are threatening my life over this. I've never said the LGBTQ community are groomers. I said groomers are groomers. And I said, actually, there are more straight white male groomers than LGBTQ groomers, but groomers comes in all shapes and sizes. Lies. But the reason I highlight this is they're not wrong when they say that online rhetoric, is pushing us towards violence. It's otherism. I got an angry phone call from a guy who asked me why I was calling LGBTQ people groomers. I said I wasn't. I said that literally never did that. In fact, every single video I've ever made on the matter is explicit when I say groomer does not refer to LGBTQ people. And I've never used it as such. There are men out there who are straight, white men, and probably most of the groomers are, who find young women and then try and convince them to do something like modeling, like I mentioned yesterday. It's just modeling, take a picture, and then slowly groom them into doing sex work. That's grooming. There are some people that are dancing naked in front of children or ripping their clothes off in front of children. They're groomers. Then you've got gays against groomers literally on the list who are LGBTQ and are not attacking the LGBTQ community. Media Matters is trying to make you think that all LGBTQ people are pedophiles. It's a very strange thing. But I do think it leads to an increase in violence because we've been getting tons of death threats. We got swatted recently. And it's because of these stories, the stochastic terrorism of Media Matters. Because I'll tell you this. They accuse me and Posobiec, James Lindsay, Jake Shields, even Blair White and the Babylon Bee of using a slur which incites violence. Despite the fact that I have repeatedly said, no violence, please, please no violence. Despite the fact that I've said groomer doesn't mean LGBTQ, right? It's because they're projecting. They are doing exactly what they accuse other people of doing. Trying to attack us, accuse us of bigotry so that violent psychopaths attack us. And so here we are. Bill Maher says domestic terrorism can lead to civil war because some Americans think their ish don't stink. Now, this is really amazing because Bill Maher said a few years ago, there can't be a civil war, and he finally came around. Bill Maher believes the tribal mentality of hate of the other that is festering in this country very possibly could lead to civil war. Yeah, I agree with him. Everything that they say can't happen here, of course it can, the comedian said on his Club Random podcast. I would love to talk to Bill Maher in a cultural setting, not political setting. I just don't think I'm going to fly to LA, and I don't think that he'd want to fly out here. So would be nice, but not likely. Some people have reached out and said, we could set this up. And I was like, I don't know. Quote, they used to say terrorism couldn't happen here, and then it happened here. We're not exempt. Americans, they think their ish don't stink, and they think that somehow they somehow live in this gilded cage where the stuff that other countries endure, well, we'll endure it too. And that could include authoritarianism. On this week's episode of Club Random, Maher invited evolutionary biologist and critic of creationism Richard Dawkins to discuss science, COVID, vaccinations, and such. But the conversation veered a little off track and led to state of the country and and led to state of the country and social behaviors of those in it. Well, my understanding is that Club Random isn't an overtly political show like Real Time is. So he says there is much talk about a second civil war, and there's lots of people rooting for it. There are many people who think that we are so divided and they hate the other side, the term that both sides use, one against the other. But the one thing they have in common, Mar said, is that it has become an existential threat, one in which you can absolutely imagine a civil war as part of it. Sure. Let me tell you, my friends, you have constitutional Republicans. I'm not talking about the GOP. Constitutional republicanism is what you and I probably believe in. A republic where you have smaller jurisdictions that send representatives to a larger jurisdiction. You get it. County, city, state, federal, blah, blah, blah. A constitution that governs the government. And then you have the multicultural democracy. They believe it's the will of the mob. They believe the Constitution is archaic and they seek to subvert this country. They cannot coexist. Eventually, either one dies or they both go hot and start beating the crap out of each other. I think it's entirely possible that we get to that and may already be in the preliminary stages. He says, quote, well, actually, let me read this. The Civil War of the 1860s was also known as the War between the States. Quote, if they captured Washington, they'd win the war. And if we captured the Southern capital, we would, as Marr put it. But the tension between the left and the right nowadays has no boundaries. That might make some think a modern war would not be possible, but Marr said it is still feasible, but with blurred lines. Bill, I'm not a Civil War expert, but the South could have taken D.C., I believe, at the first Battle of Bull Run. I've read a few academic papers. I've watched a few documentaries. I've been doing a bit more research over the past several months about the Civil War. And I read about how the South repelled camera just blurred out. I read about how the South repelled the North, but then stopped and said, we don't want to go into D.C. They didn't want to go into D.C. because they did not want to be aggressors. They wanted to be left alone. I'm not a fan of the South. I'm not a fan of war. They could have taken D.C. They didn't. Later on in the war, they probably realized they needed to because the North wasn't stopping. And then eventually the South did invade the North, going up through Maryland into Gettysburg and things of that nature. And there's a lot more that I haven't talked about. I'm not going to condense the Civil War into a minute. But he says, we're all marbled together now. There's 4 million Trump voters in California, the bluest state in the country. So we can't have a battle there. But could you have a battle as many countries have within the armed forces? Absolutely, you could. You could have factions. Trump has factions in police, the FBI. That's what you find out when the ish hits the fan. And we've seen it play out in many other countries. He's right. Yeah, Matt Taibbi wrote about the arrest that man moment, where two different high-ranking individuals from law enforcement are speeding full speed, and they get to the police station, and they both jump out and yell to the chief, arrest that man, at each other. And then that chief has to say, yay or nay, who will be arrested? I don't know, maybe arrests them both and says, I'm in charge now. But it's possible. But Bill would be wise to start doing the research. I have moderately informed opinions on the matter. I don't know enough about the Civil War to have very, very strong opinions. What I have is current knowledge on news stories going back a decade or so, decade and a half. And I have a cursory information on the Civil War. Plus, living here, I hear the opinions of those who live here. We're in the Harpers Ferry area, a very big Civil War area. And so that shapes my views and opinions. But there are many people who know so much more about the Civil War and also as much about news that know better than I. That's why I'm not going to come out here and just say I know everything. I'm only going to say it would be better for you, Bill, to learn as much as you can, because even I, knowing a little bit more than you, don't know enough to form a very, very accurate prediction. You know, I get things wrong too. But looking at the story, looking at Depape, looking at everything that's going on, you know, it's entirely possible this dude got radicalized on the internet and went to attack somebody. That's it. It's entirely possible that people are looking at what the Pelosi's are doing. I mean, come on, man. Paul Pelosi's making all this money. Nancy Pelosi's got insider information on stocks. There's the Pelosi stock tracker. A lot of people view her as deeply corrupt. I don't know what they're doing on stocks, but a lot of people accuse them of this, right? You're going to get angry people who just say enough. Because she's been in office for decades. And where's any accountability? None. Nowhere. So how long do you think this can really be held together? Law enforcement, in my opinion, eventually will break down or something. Because I think it already has. With the swattings of Marjorie Taylor Greene, with the swattings of us, and the inability of federal law enforcement and the will to do anything about it, it ain't there. They'll arrest pro-lifers. They won't arrest the people out in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes. So I think law enforcement is breaking down. You know, people asked me, as we're dealing with major security threats here at Timcast HQ, they're like, why isn't law enforcement doing anything about it? Why haven't they contacted us? Why haven't they asked us anything? And I'm like, because we're in a civil war. I mean, it's just that simple. Because they're actively going after January 6 people and pro-lifers, and they don't care that people are trying to kill us. Because they are the multicultural democracy. They are NATO. They are U.S. interventionist, expansionist powers. We're American constitutional republicanists. We believe in secure borders, manufacturing here at home. They believe in widespread internationalism. And they believe in ruling it through a mob. I don't. I'm not a fan of that. I think a constitutional republic is a great way to do it. I think the founding fathers created the greatest nation in the history of the planet. And boy, did they get some things wrong. A lot. I mean, slavery, obviously. But they got some things wrong. The Second Amendment was not worded as good as it should have been. You know what you got? Here's what you do. Convention of States, Second Amendment will be written as such. Everyone in this country is allowed to carry a weapon in any way they see fit, for any reason, and cannot be arrested or criminally charged for possession of any kind of firearm. I think I covered it, right? Or firearm accessory. And then it will say, see addendum. And the addendum will be a 300-page explanation over how you can have a silencer, you can have any new development, any old development. You get my point. The founding fathers fully intended for you to have warships. Privateers and corsairs existed. But these days, we have culturally decided you can't. If the Constitution says it, it must be upheld. It is being eroded. You shouldn't be able to commit crimes against people, okay? You know, you can't hurt people, but you can keep and bear arms to protect yourself. Anyway, I digress. It's getting crazy out there, my friends. Maybe Depape was a sex slave, says his son. I'm not so sure. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.